react to all of this, former Trump White House trade advisor Peter Navarro and author of the book In Trump Time. Peter, great to have you with us today. You know, everything that we're talking about, inflation, stock market, rising energy prices, you actually predicted all of this, specifically inflation, back in March of 2021.
That's absolutely right. And I want to follow on your previous guest, Representative Joyce from Pennsylvania. When we were in the White House with President Trump, one of the key growth drivers we seized upon was strategic energy dominance. Representative Joyce represents Pennsylvania. That is the Saudi Arabia of natural gas. The fracking there, it's the idea that natural gas prices would be going up even a tiny bit is ludicrous in this country right now. We are blessed with the wealth of natural gas, and it's there for the taking. But if you have Joe Biden and Nancy Pelosi and AOC doing their Green New Deal stuff to shut down fracking in Pennsylvania and in Michigan and to shut down the oil wells in Texas, this is what you get. And I'm old enough to remember the 1970s. It wasn't pleasant. It was gas lines and it was soaring prices. And yes, back in March, I warned of stagflation. And when I was in the White House in May of 2020, I wrote a lengthy memo to the chief of staff talking about how the pandemic could affect the inflation. And I predicted what's called stagflation, which is simultaneous slow growth or recession and inflation. And the Biden regime is doing exactly that with every single policy that they put in place. And Biden going to Capitol Hill today, I mean, look, they want to pass a $3.5 trillion bill. They call it the Green New Deal. I call it the red ink New Deal. We have to say no to that. That's one no. They want to pass a lifting of the debt ceiling. That's going to take our children and put a heavy load on them. If they pass that debt ceiling, they'll be able to do these other bills. We say no to that. And that infrastructure bill is not an infrastructure bill. It's 20% infrastructure. The rest is all manner of giveaways. So we are in a critical phase here. We're at a stagflationary crossroads. And I lay this all out in the book In Trump Time as to what we need to do, what we've been doing. But the punchline of that book and what I'm telling you here today is that Joe Biden is undoing everything President Trump did to grow this economy, raise wages, and keep prices down. And so we have what we have, which is stagflation.
Let's talk about the effects of a $1.5 to $2.1 trillion deal if they do it, because the reality is they probably are going to pass something. And then they're going to pass 1.9 of the so-called infrastructure plan, which you've made clear is not really infrastructure. So how does that end up affecting the average person, creating that inflation, slowing down the economy? How are people going to feel that?
So let's be clear, whatever they pass is going to be on top of too much that they've already passed. It's trillions and trillions and trillions. These people have no clue as to what they're doing. So I think it's really important now to send the message to the Republican Party, particularly the rhinos in the Senate, that they have to hold firm. They can't pass anything unless they're rhinos in the Senate crossing over the Democratic side. Let me be clear about that. If they pass even an additional $1 trillion, what we're going to face is inflation, a fall in the dollar, a debt crisis. And, you know, if you're 6 years old right now, right, they're forcing you to wear a mask when you don't need to. They're putting debts on your back. By the time you get to be 20 years old, it's going to be a really difficult life for you. So what we're doing is we're burdening our future generations, and we're also throwing essentially very high-priced gas now on the inflationary fire. So this is a time really to hold firm against the Biden regime. We can, if we hold firm here and say no to the debt limit raise, say no to this $3.5 trillion red ink deal, say no to this fake infrastructure deal, we can break the back of the Biden regime itself, as well as what's called inflationary expectations, a key concept in economics. If people expect inflation, becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Yeah.
We expect inflation now because the government's spending money that they don't have.
Yeah.
That happened in the 70s. People would buy something now because it was just going to cost more next week.
Yeah. I want
Yes.
to switch gears, though, right now, because I know you did want to address this as well. You're pretty fired up over General Milley's testimony on the botched withdrawal from Afghanistan, actually admitting that he would have warned the Chinese of a possible attack. Listen to this.
Did you or did you not tell him that if we were going to attack, you would let him know?
As part of that conversation, I said, General Lee, there's not going to be a war, there's not going to be an attack between great powers. And if there was, the tensions would build up. There'd be calls going back and forth from all kinds of senior officials. I said, hell, General Lee, I'll probably give you a call, but we're not going to attack you. Trust me, we're not going to attack you.
So did he break chain of command? Is that a treasonous act, and should he be court-martialed?
Yes, yes, yes. He should be wearing an orange jumpsuit. And there's one guy now, the only guy they have in the brig right now is a person who spoke up against Milley and others for not dealing correctly with the Afghanistan crisis. Let me be clear. One of the things, and I talk about it in the In Trump Time book, is the failure of high-ranking military officials and other officials to obey the chain of command. Let's be clear. President Trump is the commander-in-chief. So you had Mattis, you had Tillerson, you had McMaster. Now you have Milley doing just the most unimaginable thing. Let me assure the people of the Newsmax audience that never was I ever in the Oval Office with the president where there was any kind of discussion of war with China in a kinetic way. I mean, that is just so far beyond the pale. And the fact that Milley would go behind the president's back, make those communications with the Chinese Communist Party, kowtow to them, that is treason. That is breaking the chain of command. I'll tell you what, the complicit was Nancy Pelosi, okay? She's third in succession. It goes president, vice president, and then the Speaker of the House. She is the real insurrectionist because she was the one goading Milley on and wanting him to use the powers of the Pentagon to take out a sitting president before his term was over. And so both of these, Pelosi and Milley, need to be held accountable. There's no reason why Milley should still have a job. He ought to be under investigation, and he should be court-martialed. And let's find out all of the facts. And I can assure you, when you find out all of the facts, he should be in the brig, not the colonel I'm talking about who got in there. I forget his name, but I hope maybe Shelley. I mean, that man.
Scheller.
When I saw him speak, that was one of the most moving things I have ever seen. It was one of the most brave things I have ever seen. And Milley is not. Milley got there, and I was there when the discussions were going on. Milley is there. Not because he was the best for the job, but because there was another person in there they didn't want, so he was kind of the compromise candidate. But he's not up to the job, and because he's not up to the job, he's dangerous. Okay. And, Bob Woodward's going to make a lot of money off Milley telling that story. But the real story is that Milley should be court-martialed and convicted of violating the chain of command, which you can't have a military in this country without chain of command. And it's like Mattis, Milley, Tillerson, these people, they did harm to the American people in many different ways.
Appreciate talking with you, Peter Navarro. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Hey, I'm Rob Finnerty. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please join the conversation in the comments below. Don't forget to subscribe, too. Hit the bell icon to be alerted to breaking news. And remember, there's a whole lot more on Newsmax TV, America's fastest growing cable news network. Newsmax TV, where real news for real people.